because I've chosen the theme for November, I want to talk about life and the afterlife. I've chosen a passage from Luke's Gospel about the last few moments in Jesus' life. Two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that's called the skull, they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And they cast lots to divide his garments, and the people stood by watching. But the rulers scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." These are words inspired by God. Easily the most important influence on my spiritual life as a young child was my great-grandmother, whom I called Muddy because I couldn't pronounce her name. And Muddy died on the 6th of June in 1956. And 37 years later, I'm living in Palo Alto at that stage, I have a dream. The first time I dreamt about her, it was October 25th, 1993. And I had a dream in which Muddy came back to me. I was lying in bed in the dream, and she bent down and kissed me. And she looked really, really young and vibrant. And she said one single phrase. She said, "To me, I am." And then she was gone. And for a week, I could not figure out what in God's name was that message. To me, I am. And then I finally understood. She was saying to me, "I am not a figment of your imagination. I am not a memory from the past. I'm not a dream element. I exist." This was 37 years after she had left us. And I remember then the famous kind of self-identification when Moses has an encounter with the burning bush, and he's asking this God who wants to send him back into Egypt to set the Israelites free. And he says, "I have no idea who you are. Who are you?" And God responds, "I am who I am." Now, in actual fact, in Hebrew, it says, "Ehiya, Ashir Ehiya," which means I will be who I will be. There is actually no present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew. There's a present tense of all the other verbs, and there are all the other ways of expressing yourself in Hebrew, but there's no present tense of the verb to be. So if you want to say, for instance, I am king, you say, "Ani melech," I king. And I found the same thing actually in the Kalenjin languages. If I say in Kalenjin, I want to say, "I am an elder," I would say, "Aboyot," I elder. So you actually have to get around it by a technique called predication without a verb. You're not using a verb for the present tense because it doesn't exist. So that's what I heard Muddy saying. And in fact, not only does she exist, not only to me I am, but she can choose to be whatever she chooses to be. That she is freed from this space suit of words. And so that's what I want to continue today. Last week, I talked about thin places and the Celtic feasts. And I talked about the notion of the communion of saints. And I talked about the notion of indulgences. And I ended with a story about my grandfather, Daddy Jim, and an encounter he had on November 2nd in 1940 with a priest who had been dead for 200 years before. So today I'm going to continue with that November theme of I would call it crossing the veil, going from heaven to earth and back again. When I look at the the journey into incarnation before and afterwards. It seems to me that there are 5 great traumas in the human life. The first one I would call the trauma of the launching pads. It's where souls are volunteering for incarnation in a whole plethora of different worlds and dimensions, realizing that they're going to be radically downsizing and limiting themselves. So there's a lot of joy on the launching pad, but there's a lot of anxiety as well, because they know they're going to be locked in confining spacesuits like our physical body. So that for me would be the first great trauma of life. The second great trauma would be the merging or the docking. When that soul, for instance, merges with a zygote or a fetus or an embryo, whatever stage of conception it decides to incarnate in, that process of merging, the final realization, my God, I'm stuck in this tiny little space suit. That would be the second great trauma of life. The third great trauma, I believe, is the birth process itself. Spelunking through a cavern, where I don't know if there's going to be life at the end of it. The extraordinary contractions involved in the birthing process for the little baby. So that would be the third one for me. The fourth one, I believe, is the emergence of the ego at about age 8 months. But the first 8 months of life, typically, the little baby lives in what's called in psychology the mother-child complex. The child has no idea that there's an other. There's just the me. And when I scream, something arrives to comfort me, but I'm calling it into being. And then about age 8 months, this awful realization, the baby suddenly realizes, my God, there isn't just one of us, there are 2 of us, and all the power lies on the other side. She can go away, I can't go away. Then the final trauma, number 5, is the death process, because we've been trained, we've grown accustomed to fearing death. So there would be the 5 great traumas, I think. So I'm going to write up that process then. I'm going to look at what is it like before we came? What is it like while we're here? What is it like as we go back? And what is it like on the other side? So that's what I'm going to do today, God willing. So what is it like before we came? The first thing I believe is that we create what I call a preconception contract. Before we come, with the help of mentors and angelic beings, we choose a particular physical body that we're going to incarnate into. We choose parents, family, friends, and enemies. So we're choosing members from what I call the soul group and what I call the shadow group, that we're going to come in around the same time and play important roles in each other's lives. We choose a particular era of human history, because outside of planet Earth, there is no time. So we choose a particular era in which to incarnate. We choose a particular location, a physical, geographical location. In this instance, I chose Ireland as Seán. We choose to come in bearing certain kinds of gifts for the world, our talents, whatever our talents might be. And these are our gift to the world. We're not coming empty-handed. In Ireland, one of the worst things you can say to somebody is that the visitor came with one hand as long as the other. It means that you're not bringing a gift. You've got no bag in one hand. Your 2 hands are as long as each other. And so it's important when you visit that you bring some kind of a gift. And we come bearing gifts. We also come bearing particular issues, things that we didn't quite get right in previous incarnations, and now we're going to work on them. And that means there are particular lessons we were signing up to learn. And very importantly, there's a mission. We've come with a specific mission, given who we are. And it's a personal mission, and it is also a planetary mission. And then finally, and importantly as well, we come with some exit strategies. There are some ways we plan that we can exit finally our mission on planet Earth. We may not take the first exit when we arrive at it. The soul will make the decision. But there's a few possible exit strategies that we build into our preconception contract. So that, for me, is what happens before we come. What happens while we're here? So I look at the physical body, and it's like a brick house. So you have a brick house with 1 million bricks in the house. And every 10 seconds, you take one brick out of it, throw it away, and replace it with a brand new brick. So that, at the end of 7 years, there's not a single original brick left in the house, but the house looks the same, because you're replacing them according to a pre-existing blueprint. And so, for instance, every single cell in your body, in your stomach lining, is changed on a 4-day cycle. Every single cell in your skin is replaced on a 4 weeks cycle. Every cell in your liver is replaced in a 6 weeks cycle, and your entire skeleton is changed out every 12 weeks. In fact, in 1 year, 98% of the cells in your body are replaced. So then you have to ask yourself the question, who am I? I obviously can't be my body, because in 7 years' time, if I look at a photograph taken 7 years ago, there's not a single cell in my body today that was in my body when that photograph was taken 7 years ago. So then I take refuge in this great Hindu saying, I have a body, but I am not my body. I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. I have an intellect, but I am not even my intelligence. And I would add to that, I have a personality, but I'm not even my personality, because the personality is simply the interface between the soul and the environment. So you bring the same soul into a different environment, a different personality will emerge. It's the interface between the two. So if I'm not my body, or my emotions, or my intellect, or even my personality, who am I? And for me, the answers I give to that is, I'm a spirit in a spacesuit. I'm a soul on safari on planet Earth. I'm a bite-sized piece of God who volunteered for human incarnation. I am a holographic fractal of source. So these are the answers I come up with when I figure out, what's happening while I'm here. I want to look then at as we leave, what happens as we leave. For Hinduism, death is called the Maha Samadhi, not just the great sleep, but actually the great awakening, the great understanding that this is actually Samadhi, this is bliss in some fashion. And at every death, at the end of every incarnation, there is the possibility of instant and total enlightenment. But it comes at a very high cost. The cost is the total loss of a separate identity, even the loss of the notion of a soul. Because the soul is the first illusion on the way out from source and the last illusion on the way back into source. But instant enlightenment is available at every death if I'm prepared to separate completely from all of the identities I had, even that of being a soul in safari. Having had the privilege of attending many people as they're making the transition, what I've seen is that, it can be a radical uprooting, or it can be a very gentle evolution into the beyond. What I've seen is that we die the same way that we live. We transition the same way that we die, and we find ourselves on the other side in the same way as we transitioned. So look to who you are right now. What drives you? How much love is in your heart? How much fear is in your heart? How much anger is in your heart? How much compassion is in your heart? And if we don't change our behavior, we're going to die the way we live. And we're going to transition the way we die. And we're going to find ourselves at the other side in the same mindset with which we transitioned. We have the ability now to learn to live in compassion and love, and to harvest all situations for our own evolution. So the more we identify with the essence, the more dying feels like going home. It doesn't feel like a death. It doesn't feel like a departure. It feels like finally we're going home. So then what happens after we've gone? And there are lots of possibilities. One possibility is that some souls get stuck on the other side. They're discombobulated. They don't realize that they're dead, and they're still clinging onto kind of this physical world. I've only done 2 exorcisms in my entire life, one in Palo Alto and one in the Peninsula. And the second one was a young boy. And there was really weird stuff happening in his home. Pictures being turned back to front when the family went to town shopping. Fires taking place in waste paper baskets, a whole bunch of stuff like that. And they asked me if I would talk to the child. So I had a few sessions with him. And then at the bidding of the parents, they asked if I would do an exorcism of the house and of the child. And I did. And so I had a long session with the child in the presence of the parents, in which I put the child under hypnosis. And I wanted to find out what was the origin of this process. And what emerged was astounding. The family had recently, about 2 or 3 months beforehand, been on a visit down in Florida. And as they're coming back to the airport, they see a traffic accident on the side of the road, and they slow down, and then they keep going. And in the hypnosis, what happened was the child reported that the spirit of a person who had died in the crash that they witnessed had taken possession of the little boy's psyche, and the child is acting it out. And so by doing the exorcism and speaking directly to the soul that was trapped inside in this child's body, we were able to set that other spirit free to continue with this journey. And then all the stuff that was happening at home ended. So one possibility, the other side, is that discombobulated entities are still attached to some form of physicality. Another form of kind of attachment is addictions of various kinds, that when people are seriously addicted in some ways throughout their lifetimes, and now they're dead and they find themselves on the other side, and they can no longer indulge the addiction because they don't have physical bodies to do so, they try to attach themselves to others and kind of feed off the other people's addictions. A third reason for being stuck at the other side, I believe, is concern for those left behind. That the person who has departed is concerned for those left behind. Like, let's say a mother dies and there's a little baby left behind. And the mother doesn't want to transition because she's concerned, who's going to look after my baby? So concern for those left behind can be difficult unless they're set free. And then the other end of that is our need for those who are gone. And this is the great story in John chapter 20 of Jesus and the Magdalene. After Jesus reveals himself outside the tomb to Mary Magdalene, and she fires herself at him, and she's clinging to him. And Jesus says, Mary, do not cling to me. I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go back and tell my brothers and sisters that I am alive. So Magdalene's need for Jesus wanted her to cling to him. And so sometimes our need to cling to those who are dying keeps them stuck on the other side. So we have to be really, really careful that we're setting those free who have gone before us. Now, there are many, many different schools of thought about what happens. Is there another side? And if so, what is it like? The first one I would call the WYSIWYG model. It's a term from computer science. WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. This notion that there's nothing afterwards, there's nada. Now, if there is nothing afterwards, that death is the end, then there's no room for fear. It's like sleep. You have no awareness on the other side because there is no other side if you believe in this. So that's one school of thought. Another school of thought would be that of the monotheists, that there's only one life and one death. So there's a brand new zygote created when sperm and an egg meet each other, and God infuses a brand new soul into it, and that only happens once. And then you live your life and you die. And at that stage, according to the monotheists very often, there's a judgment. You're going to be sent either to heaven, or to purgatory, or to limbo, or to hell. And they do not believe in a pre-existence of the soul. There was no soul before this child was conceived. God infused a brand new soul into a brand new zygote, and there's no reincarnation. So that would be the kind of the monotheistic hit on what happens after death. And then there's a third one, I call it the come again model, the reincarnational model, that believes there is a pre-life. Before this incarnation, you were alive. Then you experienced incarnated life. Then you died and you experience post-incarnational life. And then you come back and you experience a reincarnational life. And so personally, I do not believe in life after death because I do not believe in death. I believe that there are just different phases to life. Some of them in an incarnated form, and some of them in a disincarnated form. So we're not dying, we're changing space suits. And finally, what is the other side really, really, really like? When we have the courage to move on. What is good heavens like? I love this Hindu model of the body, that there are 7 levels to body. Firstly, there's the gross level, the kind of that's vibrating between 400 and 700 nanometers, this physical body, which we can see and touch. And then there's the etheric body, the energy template. That's the kind of the elan vital that prints itself out as a physical body. And then there's the astral body, the place of emotions. And then the mental body, the place of archetypes. And then the causal body, where we've got psychic abilities. And then the soul body. And finally, Brahman, or cosmic consciousness. Now, I believe that during an incarnation, to the extent that we identify with one of these kind of levels of body, that's the experience we're going to have on the other side initially. So if I'm totally identified with my physical body, that it's all about, food and good sex and good wine or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with those. But if that's my idea of kind of happiness and fulfillment, then what awaits me at the other side is a McDonald's and 72 virgins. If I've reached an etheric level of body, where I realize that I'm an energy system. Then the afterlife allows me to move energetically, to move as energy in the universe itself. There's the freedom of movement because I'm not confined to a physical, dense space suit. If during my life on earth I've managed to reach the astral level, the emotional level, then heaven consists, part of heaven is reconnecting with family and friends, the emotional meeting of dead loved ones. If I've managed to reach the mental level while I'm still alive, then the afterlife means that what Paul says famously, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor has it entered into the hearts of people what things God has prepared for those who love him. In other words, we have no idea how imaginative we can be on the other side, what we can create on the other side, unless we've reached this mental level in this physical life. If we've managed to reach the causal level, the psychic level during this life, then literally we have the ability to create our own reality at the other side. And if we've managed to identify with stage 6, with the Atman, then literally you are capable of creating universes. You can play with creation. And finally, if you're ready to let go and to merge with Source itself, then you're going to merge. Now, instead of being a single wave on a beach, you are the ocean itself. As we say in our Eucharistic prayer, if you've reached that stage during life, then the afterlife means we are not separate from God, we are not separate from each other, and we are not separate from nature. Namaste, my brothers and sisters.